Hi, everybody. For those of you watching, this is actually real. That's kind of an inside joke for people who have been watching some of me practice. And then it's always great when you look up and see 10 people are watching. But I think that's the great thing about social media and something we're going to talk about today, that you can reach so many people immediately. So this is real. If you're watching, this is our Lackawanna County Arts and Culture virtual brunch, which is a take on our normal Wake Up with the Arts breakfast. I'm Maureen Mcguigan, Deputy Director of Arts and Culture. So we're thrilled to have you. We're going to start off with a little bit of music, because that's something we would always do in the arts breakfast. We would have live musicians playing as people were walking in. So we're lucky we can translate that today. And I'm really excited. We have one of our very talented musicians who's participated in many of our programs, including the Fringe Festival. He was just part of Fringe Under Glass, a successful adaptation of the pandemic that the Fringe Festival did, which we'll hear about. It's Steve Warner. He is a percussionist, and he will be playing the, here, I'll bring him on just so you can see him. He'll be playing the hand pan today. You can find him online. He's a great streamer. He does, is Steve Warner, W-E-R-N-E-R. And if you type that in, handpan, at handpan, he pops up all over Google. He's on Facebook Live. It's cool. He's using Twitch, which is actually a platform that's been around since 2011, but it's been more gamer and esport focused, but now I think more musicians are using that platform. So there's plenty of ways to find him. And we're going to enjoy about 20 minutes of his beautiful, be playing the handpan, which is, if you don't know, a beautiful instrument, very good for this healing time that we need to be relaxed. It's a modern instrument. So let me see, getting a message here. Just to make sure that the tech is, sorry. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and see if, oh, texted the video post is wrong. Okay. We all are enjoying this. We're sort of trying, we think we're getting better at this, but I will change that. But I'm going to turn it over to Steve now. So thank you. Dan want to into the spotlight here? Oops. Oh, Dan is doing this. Sorry. Hi, well, thank you. Let's do that. Thank you to Steve Warner for, can you guys hear me? Sorry, I'm already off to a non-perfect start. So let me just jump out here so people can, so before we jump to the panel, I just wanted to do a couple words of welcome and kind of explain what we're doing today and thank people. So yeah, this is our ever first virtual panel. So I'm Maureen Mcguigan, Deputy Director of Arts and Culture. I just want to explain that we're very lucky here in Lackawanna County to have a government office that supports arts and culture through a tax. We've been around since 2004. I've been here since 2008. And we do a lot of different things. We're grant makers, so we do grant programs. We have a lot of events, which unfortunately, obviously, got canceled. So we've had to pivot just like everybody. So that's one reason we're doing this today. I just want to mention some of the things we've done. So we started a Lackawanna County Arts and Culture Live series, which many of you have enjoyed. We did it weekly over the spring and summer. Now we're doing it once a month. So we got to showcase our artists and pay them a little bit during this difficult time. One of the good things that came out of it, I met so many new artists that we're now working with more. So that was great. We usually would hold a summer and winter market, but unfortunately, all those went away. So we went to an online market. So I encourage you to check out LackawannaMarkets.com. It's really growing. The holidays are coming up, so you'll find a lot of great local Northeastern PA artists to buy from. A lot of people are shopping at home, so we want to keep those dollars local. And then we also just finished up our COVID-19 Creative Community Grant Program, which we're excited we'll be announcing those grantees next week. It was a way for organizations and individual artists to get support during this time and create community projects that everyone could enjoy. So I just wanted to mention some of the things we are doing. And of course, all of our arts and culture, actually everywhere around the world, everybody's adapting. So I applaud all of our arts and culture organizations. And locally, that certainly is just as true. We have some panelists from the area. We have Conor Kelly O'Brien as moderator, who just had a successful Fringe Under Glass program, which he's going to talk about. So it's a great creative time. So I was thinking about this. We can't usually at the breakfast, we got to eat breakfast. I always love the quiche cups, but I'm not going to have those. So I do hope you all have your coffee though. I'm going to give Paul DeLuca a shout out. He's local artist, Bank Street Pottery. I have one of his mugs. So let's raise a glass for that. As I was thinking about community, and one of the beautiful things about the arts breakfast that I think everybody loved was it was a real celebration of arts. We had music at the beginning, so I was glad we could have Steve alive. Which I forgot to thank him. Steve Warner is one of our very talented musicians. He just participated in the Fringe Festival. You can find him multiple places online. It's Steve Warner, Werner. And if you type in handpan, he comes up. But we just love him, and he's participated in our breakfast before. So yeah, people would walk in and the artists would decorate the tables, and we'd feature a national speaker, and there'd be a lot of networking around that coffee station. So it's sad. We can mourn the loss of that, as many of you are, well, everyone everywhere, their favorite events. But I was thinking about community, and community is a big word, and it means so many things. It's everything. It's online. So all of you who work in arts and culture are creating that sense of community that even though it's not in person, it's still connection. It's about support and friendship and networking and helping each other and learning. And, there are some bright spots. I hope we have other people from around the country or even the world watching. We can record it and share it. Like I said, I've met a lot of new people. People are being creative and positive. So we're looking forward to hearing about some of those projects today, and hopefully learning and taking those into the world. I don't want to talk too long. You're not here to see me. So I did want to mention that though, that even though we're not in person, we are connected. So now, speaking of that, on to my thank yous. Even though we are virtual, It still takes a lot of work. As you saw, my little bit of nerves in the beginning. I've had many adventures in the online world. Think we're getting a little better, so hopefully this will go smoothly. So first of all, I want to thank our Lackawanna County Commissioners, Jerry Notarianni, Debbie Dominic Esquire, and Chris Shermack. As I said, this is a government office. We are so lucky that during this difficult time for local governments everywhere, they are committed to arts. They invest in them, they support them. They've been really open to how we've pivoted. So I think it's important to recognize that. They know how important it is to economic development and community development and healing, providing things, music and arts and, intellectual discussions like this during this time. So that's my first thank you. And then we have a Lackawanna County Arts and Culture and Education Advisory Council, and they do a lot of things. They advise on policies, they get involved in programs. So one of the subcommittees is our event planning committee, who has worked on the breakfast. This is actually the 12th year. So every year we get together. It's one of our favorite events, like I said, and we select the panelists, and they were instrumental in keeping this alive. There was a question, do we do it? So without their help in coming up with a program, this wouldn't be happening. So I want to thank Megan Pasamato, Tanya Verkaitis, Alicia Grega, Nada Gilmartin, Cole Hastings Goldstein, and Bob Savakinas for their support on this program. Also, Chris Calvey is our program manager, and many of you local people know him. He's extraordinary. He's so helpful. He manages all of our application processes and grants, which is a huge job in itself. And when we were out in the real world, he's not afraid to haul tables around with me. So, that having that staff support is, and having a colleague like that is so important. Also, I want to give a shout out to Dan Kimbrough from Park Multimedia. He was, some of our panelists are waving. He was also part of he's the tech director for the Scranton Fringe Festival. So it's nice to have all the people from that event. So this is another plus. Dan is the first time I worked with him, and he's been awesome. He's really helped come up with the flow and is doing our tech. So if you are local, his company does traditional and online virtual programming, content creation, production. So if you are local, I would highly recommend Dan's company. And let's see, I think that's all of it. And thank you to all of you watching. Without audience, we loved having that audience support. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the program. We'll moderate that. We have a great panel today. Well, we're going to hear more about their backgrounds in a second, but I just want to mention we have on Rob Buscher from the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. We have Barbara Johnson from Artworks Now in Hyattsville, Maryland. We have Travis Prince, a visual artist and board member of the Black Scranton Project. We have Francis Saldan from the curator at the Everhart Museum, and Sophie Till, who is an associate professor of violin and viola and at Marywood University and director of the Marywood String Project. So just making sure, again, thank yous and gratitude, especially during this time, are so important. But I think we're ready. So I do want to introduce our moderator, who is just a fabulous arts leader in our community. He's Conor Kelly O'Brien. He's a talented actor, award-winning, been on Off-Broadway and TV, has had his shows performed and produced internationally. But he's also, like I said, a big arts leader and advocate here. He is the co-founder and co-director of the Scranton Film Festival, which I've already mentioned a few times. And again, I had the pleasure of attending their Fringe Under Glass, which was just a super creative way to adapt a major festival, which has become very important to our community during this time. And like I said, the Fringe actually started an emergency fund for artists. So they just do a real lot. So we're really lucky to have him. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and he'll talk more about his background in the Fringe, and then we will get started. So again, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy, and feel free to refresh your coffee in between.
Thank you, Maureen. Thanks, everybody. My name is Conor Kelly O'Brien, as Maureen mentioned. Before we begin, I really want to thank Maureen and Chris and the commissioners and all of our panelists. And thank you for having me. I apologize if I look whiter than I normally do. Apparently the daylight in front of my window decided today was the day. I am incredibly thrilled to be here. I want to talk a little bit about the Scranton Fringe Festival, not just because I plug at any opportunity that I'm given, but because it will give context to why I'm moderating this discussion and where I'm coming from a COVID world. I'm not going to bore you with the long-winded history of Edinburgh Fringe. There's actually a fantastic presentation that was given at last year's Wake Up at the Arts Breakfast by Dr. Shayla Batchelder, who has her PhD in Fringe festivals. We partnered with the county back then because it overlapped with our festival in 2019, and it's so informative and does a better job than I ever will. So if that's available online or ECTV, I highly recommend go find it. And if it's not, we'll make sure it is by this time tomorrow. The Edinburgh Fringe is the largest arts festival in the world. It's actually the largest annual ticketed event, period, in the world. It is only surpassed by the World Cup and the Olympics, which, of course, in a normal world and year, is every few years or every other year, not every year. So we are modeled after that. Scranton Fringe began in 2015. We are dedicated to providing an accessible and engaging platform for artists and audiences. And a third cornerstone of our mission is promoting Northeast Pennsylvania, Lackawanna County greater area as a viable creative marketplace. So we really prioritize that our stakeholders are our artists, our audience, and then beyond that, the overall community, whether that's nonprofit, for-profit, commercial, small businesses. The Scranton Fringe Festival has grown over the years. We began in 2015 with a four-day event, and we had approximately 2,500 in attending. Last year was our 5th anniversary. It has grown into an 11-day celebration of the performing arts, featuring over 100 productions from across the world, predominantly within our own region, but with guests from all over, and we are reaching 10,000 in attendance each year. Obviously, the pandemic changed things, so we transitioned into a program. We canceled the festival. We thought it was important to acknowledge that it's not the same. But we transitioned into a program called Fringe Under Glass. We're actually going to pull up some images from that. It was just a few weeks ago, as Maureen mentioned. Fringe Under Glass took live performances either outside from a distance or predominantly behind glass in storefront windows, utilizing wireless headphone technology like you see the guests there watching. That's Gaslight Theater Company. The headsets allowed the audiences to safely distance outside and immerse themselves audio into the performance, as you see there with the glowing blue headsets. It was really, really cool. That event was predominantly made possible via various partnerships. This, for example, is New Wave Studios in Scranton. We worked with the Black Scranton Project, AFTA Gallery, Gaslight Theater Company, Simone Daniel, Nicole Nichols, the Pop-Up Studio, Mostly Opera, Steve Warner and Justin Padro and his trio, Ian O'Hara, and various other pop-up performers. And I want to thank all of the venues and businesses who made it possible. That was the Pop-Up Studio, who did a very interesting original performance. So that is one way that we at Scranton, and that is Floor 13. That is actually a high school trio that was set to premiere this full-length show at the Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland. What would have been this August, of course, is not occurring, but hopefully will occur next summer. And I'm hoping to return for my 5th year. The Scranton Fringe Festival has produced events at the Edinburgh Fringe, including our LGBTQ Story Slam, which was very successful, and we've also brought that to New York. Scranton Fringe also adapted to digital content back in the spring with a program we called Social Distance Scene Theater, which we are reviving this winter. If you're an artist or performer out there and you have original content, whether live, pre-recorded, or something in between, podcast, we would love to include it at no charge. We just split ticket sales and donations with our artists. And we also, as Maureen mentioned, launched an emergency fund, which as of today has distributed over $10,000 to Northeast Pennsylvania artists and creative gig workers, from actors, designers, tattoo artists who were out of work and or financially impacted by COVID-19. The fund has closed for the time being, but if you are in need or you think you're going to be in need, the application is still open. It's just a waitlist period at this point. We are unfortunately anticipating the need to revive it come this winter in early 2021. So if you need that, please take advantage of it. That is a very rapid fire. I did it in 3.5 minutes of Scranton Fringe and our work during COVID-19. So I'll be touching base on that. But enough about our festival here in Scranton, which we of course love. What I really want to talk about right now is the Philadelphia American Asian Film Festival with its festival director and board member, Rob Buscher. So we are going to bring Rob up onto the screen and have a little chat. Good morning.
Thanks,
how are
Conor.
you?
I'm great. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Now, Rob, I believe you have a presentation for us, correct?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful. While Dan pulls that onto the screen, I just want to ask you very quickly, and if this is is included in your presentation, don't mind me, but could you tell us a little bit about your organization and the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival?
Yeah, sure. So Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival is the largest Asian American Pacific Islander film festival on the East Coast. We've been around since 2008, and this will be our 13th annual festival, November 5th through the 15th. We're moving into a virtual format like many other film festivals have. So, you know, as you can see from the slide, here are a couple of images from past festivals. PAF is primarily a film festival, but we're also the only major creative hub for Asian American and Pacific Islander Americans in our region to celebrate music, food, theater, visual arts, and other creative pursuits. Annually, we attract around 5,000 attendees. You can move to the next slide, please. So, you know, as I had mentioned briefly, we are moving into an all online mode. I think that was going to be our decision regardless of what the policy was, but Mayor Kenny in Philadelphia also implemented a public event ban through February 2021, which made that decision very easy for us. Obviously, you know, being in a crowded movie theater, this is one of the high risk transmission areas for COVID infection. We don't want to put ourselves, our staff, or any of our audience members at risk. So yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting journey like many other film festivals, and we have decided to move into that all online medium.
Great.
The project that I wanted to talk to you specifically about today, though, was the Tadima virtual pilgrimage, because PAF was one of over 60 organizations nationwide that engaged in 9 weeks of free online programming by and about the Japanese American community. I myself am a mixed race Japanese American, and many of our families were incarcerated during World War II as a result of the wartime hysteria. Annually, our elders and incarceration survivors' descendants actually make pilgrimages back to these confinement sites throughout the country. And it's a really important time for people to kind of gather and, you know, recollect themselves and touch base with the community. Obviously, that's not possible in a COVID world, right? Especially when so many of our elders are at high risk for infection. So instead, this giant collaboration was initiated where we began working together. And personally, I curated a film festival that lasted 9 weeks. We showed over 65 films that were completely free to the public. And in the 9 weeks, we had over 110,000 people, both nationwide and internationally. So the images that you're looking at are actually a map of where the density of the people were logging on. We actually had participants from all 50 states by the end of those 9 weeks, as well as 38 countries abroad. Next slide, please. So just wanted to show a couple of other statistics here to richen that discussion a little bit. This was from the Vimeo page where most of the films were held. You can see we had over 42,000 views on the films that were held on our Vimeo channel alone. That was only about half of the films that were in the festival. So you can get a sense of, you know, how many people were actually participating in this. And there's just one more slide. And then this was our YouTube channel. So in addition to having asynchronous film screenings that people could watch on their own time, we also had live Q&As and other discussion activities that took place via YouTube Live. And you can see here about 47,000 people engaged in those live discussions. And that number has continued to increase since all of those videos are available in recorded versions online. So I guess, you know, if anything, the icing on the cake here is that when we're looking at the impact of COVID on our communities, particularly as, you know, minoritized communities, it obviously has impacted a lot of us harder than other groups. But at the same time, being able to gather people in non-traditional virtual spaces has led to these very rich, nuanced discussions that I'm happy to elaborate on throughout the course of this panel.
That's absolutely incredible. Can I ask you a question? Assuming whatever normality is going to look like, of course, it'll never be quite the same, but whether it's next year or the following year, if and when you return to a more traditional in-person model, is there anything from this experience that you hope to never lose? I'm fascinated by people who are, as you mentioned, finding icings on the cake. What do you hope that you maintain and carry over into, in a post-vaccine world? And how do you plan on achieving that?
I think it's a challenge to imagine what a post-COVID world is going to look like, particularly for film festivals, because as you've probably seen in the news, major motion picture cinema chains are closing down, both here and in the United Kingdom. There's really not going to be it's going to be a new normal, right? It's not like going back to the way that things were. So I think we all need to be a lot more creative about how we engage our audiences. One of the things that we've always done through PAF is have off-screen programming that includes, live theater performances, chef demonstrations, musical concerts. And these are the kinds of things that I think generally people have come to the festival for, in addition, obviously, to the film content itself. And when we're able to have like a digital space like this, the one thing that I like the most about it is that we have all of these audience members from places that would no way be able to attend the festival in person because of the geographical distance. And they're connecting in some cases for the very first time with this community that, makes them feel like they're at home.
You mentioned earlier, you touched on briefly that, we all are aware of the universal collective challenges as arts organizations and individuals were facing with COVID-19 and trying to do our work. But you highlighted on a very important topic, which is marginalized and underserved communities have extra burdens on top of them to contend with. Can you highlight a little bit more about that, and specifically how has PAF addressed these challenges, or how are you ongoingly addressing these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, it's important to acknowledge that BIPOC communities have been essentially impacted the worst and the hardest, right? Because of the infection rates and also the death rates in terms of folks who aren't recovering because they haven't gotten proper medical care. Within the Asian American community specifically, there's been a lot of anti-Asian racism that has led to actual violent hate crimes that are taking place here in the city of Philadelphia and elsewhere around the country. A lot of that stems from rhetoric where people are kind of scapegoating the Chinese for COVID, right? And saying things like China virus or Kung flu. It might seem like a small thing, but this has actually led to a very outwardly violent interactions that a lot of people have experienced here. So one of the things that we're actually doing right now, we're planning a series of discussions that are kind of highlighting the aspects of historical scapegoating during disease pandemics. And unfortunately, that's something that has persisted with regards to Asian immigrants ever since the 1880s during the Yellow Peril era. So finding ways to kind of have conversations like within the historical parallels, doing that in an online space is helpful as well, because it enables us to engage with audiences that might not have historically been a part of the film festival audience in a wide array of age demographics. And I think that's actually one of the other things about Tadima as well. We had a sizable portion of 65 plus and even elder than that, right? We had a lot of Japanese Americans who are in their 70s and even 80s that were regularly participating in live Q&As on YouTube and engaging in conversation with their peer group, which, historically you think about what generations use technology. And I think we sort of have a blind spot because we're thinking, senior citizens are less inclined or less tech savvy. But in fact, that was not the case. And we're able to show that there was a demand for it and that given the opportunity, people will engage.
Absolutely. If there is anyone out there, and I'm assuming there's many, or even just those of us in this virtual meeting right now, if there was one thing from a logistic production, direct festival producer perspective that you wish you had known, despite how incredibly successful it sounds as it was and deserving of congratulations, is there one thing you wish someone could have told you back in March to make your life a little easier, or to a piece of technical advice you would offer your past self?
I don't know that there's too much you could have told me at that point, because it's like like all things, you kind of need to do something a lot in order to get good at it. And, you know, Maureen, I feel you on the nerves thing, right? Because when you're doing virtual programming in a space like this, it can be intimidating. But after 9 weeks of it, I think by week 7 or 8, we finally got into that groove. And, you know, it's something that everyone needs to adjust to. But I think at the same time, thankfully, all of our audiences are just adjusting to it as well. So I think although we still need to deliver professional quality content, there's a understanding and acceptance as we're all figuring out what it means to engage in arts programming in a virtual space.
Fantastic. We're definitely going to be touching back with you when we get to the group level, but I want to thank you so much for everything you offered. For anyone who wants to learn more or, you know, buy tickets or support your programming, where can they go to learn more?
You can go to paaff.org, and I can drop that link into the chat.
Please do, paaff.org. Thank you so much. We're going to be back with you in just a few minutes. Now we are moving on. Thank you so much. We are moving on to the founder and executive director of Artworks Now in Hyattsville, Maryland, Barbara Johnson. Good morning, Barbara. How are you?
Good morning, Connor. I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing okay. I'm loving all these discussions. Let's hit the ground running. Now, Barbara, I believe you have a presentation for us as well, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, fantastic. Before we dive into that, can you just very quickly, and if this is part of the presentation, then, you know, tell me to shut up. Tell me a little bit about Artworks Now in Hyattsville, Maryland.
Well, it actually is part of the presentation in that
dive in.
What I decided to do was to talk a little bit about pre-COVID Artworks Now, to sort of give the context of what was happening, what is happening, and to move forward. So Artworks Now. This was Artworks Now before the pandemic. We are an arts and social justice. Oh, slow down. If you could go back to that, we're an arts and
just so you know, I know your slide has many slides. Just so you know, we do have to get through a lot.
Okay. So yes, I'm going to let them talk for themselves after I say this.
Perfect.
We're an arts and social justice organization in Hyattsville, Maryland, which is just about 2 miles from the DC line. And from here, I'll let the slides speak for themselves.
Fantastic. With college, you can, I mean, please touch on them as well. We may have friends who.
The group here is actually a group of students from Kutztown University in Pennsylvania. They come down to visit us. This is our annual gingerbread house celebration where we have over 300 people attend for free to create gingerbread houses. We have a lot of activities called creative community actions, where we come together to do social justice and artwork. Next slide. We also take our actions out on the road. This was in support of the ratifying the ERA. In 2019, we began our creative aging program, thanks to the National Guild for Community Arts Education. And we are out in our community full force engaging with older adults, and all of our creative aging programs are free. We also partner with a number of public schools, creating art. The piece on the left was done in a classroom. The top left piece is outside of a local elementary. And the piece on the right is an actual moving weather vane that sits in front of a county building and was created by our county school students. Well, they designed it. We had a fabricator actually build it. The building itself, our facility, has been the creative home for toddlers, school-age children, adults, regular adults, and then older adults. Our summer camps, last year we had 432 kids over 11 weeks. They were all about meeting friends, visiting local artists, and splashing around in the water in the summer heat. This is a quick snapshot of our 2019 by the numbers. It gave me a lot of emotions reading this and thinking about how this is going to be different in 2020.
Yeah.
This is Artworks today, in that the first interaction and the more meaningful interaction people have, I think, with us is to go to our website and find out what's available. But this is what we look like today in person. There is not much activity. We do share the building with a great local restaurant and partner, and we have made sure to put our community's voices front and center in the space. We have been able to work with community members on a couple of occasions over the summer to participate in marches, and with the family march for Black Lives, the night before, we held a virtual poster making event for free. One of the most meaningful things we're doing now is we're supporting our community through a partnership with Paradiso, and we've distributed nearly 20,000 pizzas and art activities to area hospitals and to those experiencing food insecurity. The picture in the top right is what happens once a week when people in our community line up both on foot all the way around the building and all the way up the street to pick up their free food and free art activity. And the other picture is a delivery to Sibley Hospital. We're still able to do our annual project with Hyattsville Elementary School students. We held a virtual class with the Anacostia Watershed Society, and the students submitted their artwork on the top left as a great example, and then our teaching artist turned their individual images into panels for the ongoing mural project with the school.
Lovely.
Our summer camps happened, but they were really different. We created kits that parents could pick up, and we met. And one thing we found that was really important is that we kept the classroom, if you will, or the studios small so that everybody was on one page, which it meant more sections, but it was really important that it wasn't a scroll through, and that everyone could see each other. An important thing that we've learned over this time is how important storytelling is. I mean, we've known it a long time, but really right now, storytelling and getting out the sort of word of mouth of how our work is impacting real people in real time seems to be really powerful, and it uplifts the staff, if nothing else. One of the immediate issues was that we needed to be careful with our money, and our administrative staff became teaching artists at the outset. We all have a history of doing that, so that wasn't an issue. But as emergency funds came in, we've been able to contract with several teaching artists from around the country, actually, and are offering a number of different virtual classes. And we are venturing into the real world this month. We started our first in-person wheel throwing classes for adults. While a big part of our community work is with children, we don't really feel safe trying to keep them separate and safe. So we've engaged with very small groups of adults in a very large space. And we're going to try on October 30th to have an outdoor beer and artwork festival. Very small. We are continuing and will continue to work via Zoom with all ages. And this is Artworks Today. And I have to say, I wrote this and I could just speak it, but we really are more flexible. Our team, both the board and staff, are more committed to the mission. And we have experienced such a deepening of our connection with our community. Our participation numbers really are up over 200% from the prior year. But our earned income, actually, I should update that. It's actually down 89% from 2019. And that's because we switched from tuition-based to pay what you can, because people are really suffering financially. And I have to say, thanks to a lot of regional foundations, the emergency funding, and a great team. We really are not just surviving, we are thriving, which is extraordinary to me.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. My first question I want to touch upon ties back in a theme I'm seeing with Rob from the Asian American Film Festival in Philadelphia. You talked a lot about how you serve a wide range of ages in your programming. Can you talk a little bit about how you found your older senior citizen-based audience and how they're adapting to technology? Rob touched on a point. I think there is a false stereotype that, oh, they're not tech savvy, it's not going to work, they're not going to enjoy it. How have you found, is it the same core audience of patrons that you had before? Is it new? Is it a mixture?
It's a mixture. And what I found was really the issue was economics. You know, that there are a number of people in all age groups who lack access to internet and who lack access to computers. And so those are the people in every age group that have suffered and have not been able to engage with us fully. And we're actually working with the county on that here. But our creative aging group actually increased. The last session we had was 16 people live. We now have 39 people in 2 different sections, and it's growing and growing. And it's extraordinary to see. So I after taking this program with the Guild, I want to say I am a super advocate for fighting ageism, and so I want to thank Rob there. It really there are a lot of false notions about older adults. There really are some of our most engaged and amazing students.
You talked about towards the end of your presentation the support you've received from some of your regional foundations, and I think all of us here at every level, small, big, medium, of organizations and individual artists, we deal a lot with institutions, whether they're municipalities or foundations or non-private nonprofits. And I want to thank, for example, like Lackawanna County Arts and Culture Department for doing wonderful programming like this. I'm curious to know, from your perspective, when it comes to these larger organizations and institutions, these foundations, these funding agencies, if any of them are watching this now or after the fact, what's something that you would wish to see more of in terms of providing artistic support? Or, as wonderful as you mentioned in the tremendous support you've received, I'm sure there's always room for improvement. What do you feel we need to see more of from those groups?
Taking a breath and clarity. So one of the issues we've had is when a foundation or some funding body makes a statement about how a funding stream will be available, and then we follow that rule, and then the rule sort of changes organically without a lot of communication. And so that has been a source of some frustration. On the other hand, I want to say what's been great is communication. The Maryland State Arts Council, for example, has been holding really tremendous weekly gatherings with organizations and artists, and asking questions. And I think that would be another thing I would ask, is that all funders ask questions. What do we need as artists and arts organizations, I think would be the question.
I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Rob earlier, which is, if there was one piece of advice you would give, even if not yourself, but another artist or creative arts leader that's maybe just starting to really engage into digital content. All of us in this room are obviously here because we've been doing this for 6 months onward now, but there are some organizations that are so small, or individuals that just haven't had the ability or time to do so yet. So for those that are embarking onto this new brave territory, what's one piece of advice you would give them above all else?
Embrace imperfection, and the scarier it is, the more it means to you, and the more reason there is to do it. And I find audiences are very forgiving about quirky little gaffes, and my cat walking by right down there sometimes, and whatever else happens. It's about the connection. And so I think if we focus on connecting and making meaning and developing relationships. You know, the fact that, you know, the lighting where you are isn't what you hoped it would be. Who cares?
I don't know what you're talking about. Rob, so it seems like you and Rob both are touching on in the same, because one of my other questions I wanted to ask, and we'll talk about that when we get all of us back together, was what are you personally doing to take care of yourself? And, you know, what does, it sounds almost cliche at this point, but what does self-care look like to you? And it sounds like you and Rob both are touching upon patience with yourself and with the ever-growing technology. And it seems that not only for yourself, but your audience are embracing that. Rob, I'll bring you back in for 1 second. Would you agree that patience is a very helpful virtue in this endeavor?
Yeah, and I think in general, I mean, all of us do events here to an extent, and I think anyone who's done this kind of work for a while knows that something inevitably is going to go wrong, and you just hope it's one of the things that you have control over and are able to roll with that punch.
I totally agree. When we started the Fringe, and mind you, we started from, you know, a fundraising event we kicked off the year prior, which had like 50 people in attendance, to today up to 10,000. And my co-founder, who vastly experienced in human resources and management and business, but wasn't as experienced in arts and live event as I was at that time, the number one piece of advice that I gave her, and she has now returned to me in my stressful moments, is that no one but us knows what this was supposed to look like. No one but this, you know, core. And of course, I'm not talking about core ethics or major values, but, you know, the little things. That banner didn't get hung the way you wanted to, you know, live with it. Thank you, Barbara, so much. We're going to be bringing you back in 1 second. I do want to bring on our next panelist, which is a more familiar face to those of us in Northeast Pennsylvania and beyond. We are bringing on Travis Prince, a phenomenal award-winning visual artist, as well as a board member of the Black Scranton Project. Well, let's welcome Travis.
Hey guys.
Hi, good morning. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. Happy to be in attendance.
Wonderful. Travis, I believe you have a presentation for us that will sort of kick off our conversation properly, correct?
Yes, yes.
All right, let's bring that right up, Dan, whenever you have a second. I say that like this is not the only thing, this is what he's doing. Fantastic. Excellent. So let's dive right into your next slide.
Yeah, and so some of the things that I've been doing personally and my organization has been doing to survive the pandemic is trying to keep things as normal as possible in these trying, confusing times. The Black Scranton Project, we host several events throughout the year, but once again, most of our events were canceled due to COVID, but we felt like our Juneteenth celebration is something that's so important and so significant and so dear to our hearts personally that we really, really wanted to have this event be successful, even though we had to deal with the situations and circumstances at hand. Even Senator Bob Casey came out in support for us, and the community came out, and it was a great time of fellowship and understanding, and we had tons of great speakers and a really good time out there for our Juneteenth Jubilee. And once again, just trying to keep our community, you know, that adhesion and coherence there, and keep that sense of togetherness and fellowship. So that was really important for us. I also do a local TV show. It's hosted on our local ECT television. And it was really a struggle to try to keep this, you know, going full steam earlier on. And after, you know, some people have been tested for COVID, and making sure that everyone understands the sanitation and distancing rules, we decided to continue filming some episodes this year. So we were able to actually produce 4 episodes throughout the pandemic since I would say May or June of this year. And once again, just trying to keep the community engaged, to keep the arts alive, to keep everybody inspired and motivated, and try to keep everybody on a positive attitude and a positive wavelength. And once again, just trying to maintain some type of normality throughout this whole thing.
When you say you've been touching a lot about, we'll move on to the mural section in 1 second, but you talked a lot about engagement and keeping A key word I kept hearing that you bring up was fellowship and engagement. How have, whether it's through your own career as an artist, your talk show, or through the Black Scranton Project, whatever you prefer to discuss, how have you maintained a sense of community? I know Juneteenth, which by the way, I was in attendance. We ran a small outreach table for Fringe, and it was, not only was it such a wonderful event and so safe and well executed, but it was, I think the whole community of Scranton, really the whole region, I think it was so necessary. The best way I heard someone describe it was that it felt like an exhale for the first time in months. And no irony but the breathing metaphor there. In terms of COVID, do you, when it comes to engagement though in digital spaces, because some of those people who may be watching may not have, live in a region that we've been relatively fortunate with COVID, and or it's just not possible for them, or they don't feel comfortable. How have you maintained fellowship and engagement in digital spaces, and how have you found that helpful and challenging?
Well, besides my official television show for ECTV, I also do a live YouTube channel as well. And I've been doing that for years. So that's always one of my major ways to stay engaged with artistic audiences globally, internationally. And it really all depends on what time of the day that I start a stream. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, then I know it's in the afternoon in Japan and Germany. And so I would get a different set of viewers there. Or, if it's 1 o'clock here, it's, 8 o'clock in California. And so I still always try to put my art out there on as many digital platforms as possible, because I always take it back to the Bob Ross thing. Like, people love art, even if you're not a great artist or a terrific art connoisseur. Watching somebody create art is a calming scene. It's something that's that can give you a little bit of serenity. And so I always try to find a way to put that out there as much as I can, and using different platforms to stream live just to keep people engaged with the art, I find is a very helpful tool.
Excellent. We'll go back to your presentation now, and you mentioned with the Bob Ross reference that even someone who's not a great artist can enjoy it. However, that is not the case for you, as you are a terrific artist. Okay. As we get your presentation pulled up, let me just ask you, as an artist in general, where do you get your inspiration from? And as you're talking, your presentation will come back up, and we'll be able to see some of your work.
Yeah, well, I've always derived my inspiration from everyday normal life. I'll do another name drop. Norman Rockwell is one of my very, very first inspirations. And when you look at his art, it's the realist movement of the 20s and 30s, where it's normal scenes of everyday life that we all can find familiar. Going to the barbershop and getting your hair cut, or sitting down and having a cup of coffee with a good friend, or Thanksgiving dinner with your family. It's those really real intimate moments that we all can share, that still somehow finds a way to spark this conversation within us of what really brings us together in the visual format of art. And I also really try to focus on the emergence of education in my art. And one of my flagship series is my Reader series, where it's portraiture, but not exactly portraiture, because I implement specific literature into my art, and I propose that the literature itself is the main focal point of the piece, and the portrait portion is somewhat of a co-star or a co-actor to the literature that I'm trying to bring to the audience.
Interesting. I apologize to everyone. We seem to be having technical difficulties on our screen
Well,
share.
this is what we just talked about, and these are the moments where, you know, you
Just
just
keep
roll
talking.
with the punches and go with the flow, because things happen, you know.
I really want to. There we go. Thank you, Dan.
Hey.
So this is some of your mural work, Travis. And just for the sake of time, I also want to get to Art of the State as quickly as
yes, but this is a concept idea, like Maureen said. This is we had a grant for murals, and so this is a concept idea that I wanted to put out. This is actually the office building I work at, which is Outreach Center for Community Resources.
Mm-hmm.
And through this whole COVID pandemic, it's just like my thinking is, I want to see kids doing kid things, enjoying life as a kid, and just having fun. So some kids just blowing bubbles outside and running around, and you know, and these are some murals that I actually finished that are inside the facility. We do a lot of parenting classes and working with children and supervised visitations. So when kids are placed in these types of environments, we want them to be as warm and welcoming as possible. And so I thought that some murals would liven up our classrooms and our facility a little bit, and actually had Chris from PA Live come down and do a small interview on the work that I was doing there.
Cool.
Which turned out really well.
Those are beautiful. And then let's move on in the presentation so we can get to what do we have here?
Oh, this is a collaboration between Keystone Ironworks and the Black Scranton Project. This was called Monument Markers and Memorials. Keystone Ironworks is our local iron pouring group, and this year we thought to give the students a little bit more meat to chew on. And so our concept of monument, marker, memorial in this crazy time that we're living in, where we have these statues, these monuments of war generals being torn down, and we have these memorials being placed up for Black bodies that have been executed in public. And so we took 5 weeks and gave 2 classes a week on different artists, and very in-depth talking points on social issues and stigmas that we are currently facing here in our country. And we wanted the students to take all this information and to produce a somewhat of a marker or monument for themselves. And they came up with some really, really creative ideas. And since COVID has our iron furnaces shut down, Nikki Moser and some of her team actually drove our molds all the way to Pittsburgh to have these things casted.
Wow.
And so we did the classes virtually, had 16 students of all ages, and it was a really, really good thing. I've also been working on some product development. I had an idea a little over a year ago on how I can hold my brushes a little bit better while I'm painting and have tons of wet brushes. And so sitting down throughout COVID, you know, not a lot of things to do, I kind of expanded on this idea a little bit more and actually have brought this product into fruition. I just got my shipments in yesterday, so I'll be shipping some of these out over the next couple of weeks. And once again, trying to share this with people on, you know, don't let this thing stop your creativity. Don't become stagnant.
Right.
Don't push your ideas to the side or on the back burner because it seems like things are falling apart around us. Always try to stay motivated, stay positive, and continue to put your ideas out there for people to see. You never know what's going to happen.
Fantastic. Travis, thank you so much. We're going to be checking back with you in 1 second. We just have to move on. Thank you so much. Up next with our discussion, we have Frances Saldan, the curator of collections and exhibitions at the Everhart Museum of Natural History, Science, and Art right here in the Hill section of Scranton, Pennsylvania. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. You have a presentation for us, correct?
I do.
Okay, we're going to bring your presentation right up. For the sake of time, I'm just going to have you self-direct through it.
Yeah, of course.
And then we'll get to the end of it, and then we'll have a little chat.
Yeah, so today I thought I would discuss two projects. Obviously, the Everhart has been working on a few more, but two that we're going to highlight that we've been pivoted into the virtual world during the pandemic. So one of those is our summer internship program, and the other is our fall exhibition that opened earlier in September. So on this slide, you'll see a few pictures of our previous in-person internship cycles. At the beginning of 2019, myself and a few other members of senior staff decided to create a formal internship program that we would launch in summer of 2020. That would be cohort-based, that would offer opportunities for interns to network with staff, as well as visit other local institutions and get a more robust experience. But COVID happened and pretty much ruined all of our original plans. So we had a decision. We either had to cancel the program or make it virtual and remote-based. We'd never done remote-based internships before, and as a staff, we were really still getting accustomed to working remotely ourselves, but we decided to do it. On the next slide, you'll see that this really meant that we had to lean into technology, as I think everyone is pretty familiar with. So we use technology to have our weekly check-ins and even do virtual field trips to fulfill that original idea that we had. So you can see some of the screenshots from those sessions here. So we decided for at least the next couple of cycles of internships to stick with this remote-based internship model. On the next slide, you'll see all of the states that we've received applications for our fall 2020 internships, which has grown pretty significantly. Prior to this, we were really only receiving applications for students that were from the surrounding counties, so mainly Lackawanna and Luzerne. But here you can see states from around the country. And our application pool actually increased by 150%. So this model is really allowing us to also pursue partnerships with out-of-town universities and to establish pipelines for paid internships, which has always been on the forefront of a lot of our discussions. So the next project you'll see here, at the end of the summer, we also had an approaching deadline for our new fall exhibition, Eyes on America. And we were unsure if we would be open, unsure of how comfortable visitors would be coming to the museum. And that also extended to school groups as well. So staff decided to invest in a platform, which you can see here. This is called Culture Connect, where we've been able to create a virtual version of the entire exhibition. On the next slide, you'll see a little more of what this exhibit looks like as you click through. You can find the link on the bottom if you click through the mobile guide, or you can go through our website to see it. It can be accessible on your phone, which is great, or on the desktop. So both of these projects were very time intensive. I think anyone that works in converting an original idea to a virtual platform can definitely acknowledge that. But I think they've both been tremendously successful, maybe in ways that we didn't originally anticipate. And they've really helped to expand our reach nationally, and I would say potentially globally, making the work that we do accessible just with an internet connection.
Fantastic. I want to ask you a couple of questions, but the first one I'm going to ask you is the same that I've been asking everybody, which is whether it was a message to yourself 6-7 months ago or just a word of advice. I'm also really trying to dive in more to the practical. We've been talking a lot about more of the abstract and the emotional, which is just as important, but is there any practical advice that you would really give someone, whether a fellow curator or anyone big or small in the creative arts world that is adjusting to, as you said, pivoting to digital content?
Yeah, so I think that goes hand in hand with the advice, if I could time travel back a couple of months to give myself, would be to kind of let go of the idea that we're going to be going back to normal, or normal in the sense of what we all thought. I think back in March, we were all kind of planning for this to be over by the summer, and we were kind of just biding our time to get there, to get to go back. But I think if I had really just been like, this is how it's going to be, and so we need to really just embrace this new world, that would have, I think, helped to remedy a lot of the hiccups early on in terms of not adapting old processes for a temporary, but really investing in creating something that was totally new. And with that, I think it's really important to give yourself extra time when you're creating virtual things and experiences. They often take a lot more time. There's definitely a huge learning curve. The platform that I gave you all a preview of, Culture Connect, From a visitor perspective, it's very smooth and awesome. On the back end, it's kind of a beast. So that was something that our staff really had to adapt to. And we did it very quickly. So in an ideal world, the timeline would be much more extended. But as we know, pivoting really means doing it live. So
Right.
I think those two things would be what I would suggest.
Are there any particular steps or methods you and your team are taking to hopefully transition some of these digital audiences into someday? Because just for clarity, the Everhart Museum has resumed limited social distancing hours on Saturday and Sundays, correct?
Yes.
Is there anything that you're hoping to see, or how are you trying to translate some of these digital new audiences into someday, whether now or a year from now, in-person attendance at the museum?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think in our immediate strategy, we really wanted to make the content that we were creating just more accessible to our immediate community. Originally, we hadn't really envisioned this being something that could have a national or global reach, but I think that that's been something that anyone who's dove into the virtual world is experiencing the potential of. Our education program is actually really pioneering this sort of hybrid version of a lot of their educational offerings. Right now, it's mostly digital and virtual, but moving forward, being able to offer more of a hybrid approach. So being able to send out kits or have Zoom or virtual meetings like we're doing right now, as well as potentially having an in-person component for people that are within the area or could potentially travel. I think ultimately what this has really opened the door for in terms of the Everhart, and I think for a lot of organizations, is gaining a greater sense of visibility from maybe outside communities, definitely out of state, that might not have heard of us before. So I think that could open the door to having Scranton being more of a tourist location and potentially us reaping the benefits and having more visitors in the door.
That's fantastic. What is your favorite either item, exhibit, or part of the Everhart Museum?
Oh, well, I think I'll have a biased answer.
Okay.
Well, so I guess I'll plug our newest exhibit, which I showed you a little bit about, which is called Eyes on America. It'll be up through the end of the year. We do have modified hours, so if anyone's in the area, you can come in on Saturdays or Sundays, 10 to 5 on Saturdays, 12 to 5 on Sundays, and the whole exhibit is accessible online, so please do check it out. That really delves into some of the symbols, myths and truths that are very complicated about American identity, which I think during this year, just as an election year, as the anniversary of women's voting rights, as well as all of these other topics that have come up, is pretty relevant. So I would say that right now is one of the really exciting projects that we've been able to bring to its feet.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Don't go away. We'll be right back with you. Last, but absolutely certainly not least, we have Sophie Till, Clinical Assistant Professor of Violin and Viola at Marywood University and the Director of the Marywood University String Project. Good afternoon, Sophie. It just turned noon. Good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Wonderful. I believe you, in fact, have a video with sound to play for us today, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Great. Can you tell us, while we get that queued up, can you tell us a little bit about what we're about to see?
Yeah, so I'm part of the National String Project Consortium. This is a national organization which has a twofold mission, which is to provide low-cost string education to kids in the region. And then it's also a teacher training program for undergraduate students and graduate students. So we have about 3,000 children across the nation, and each of our projects is in a different university. So they're all housed in different universities, and they all serve very different demographics. We have a sort of basic model, but then each site is specific so that it can serve its community. So this was a project, we've been around for 20 years. This is a project that was designed to draw us all together. I think like most of us arts organizations, we're a shoestring organization in terms of budgets. So we've always faced this challenge of having these amazing programs, but none of us feel connected. There's no way to bring us together. You know, pre-pandemic, we couldn't have some great stadium and bring all these 3,000 children together, which would have been wonderful. So this was a way to bring us all together to celebrate our 20th anniversary. It was actually conceived pre-pandemic, which is sort of amazing looking back on it. It emerged during the pandemic and has led to some wonderful stuff since then. So what we did was we had a very special composer, Brian Balmages, wrote us a piece for triple string orchestra. The idea being that you could have kids of totally different playing levels take part. And he also, you know, when we started this project, nobody knew how to do it, how to create a virtual orchestra of kids, some of whom are complete beginners and had played for months. Just a few months. So how do you do that? How do you reach them in all these different places? And then how do you put all this together? So
well, we are going. Thank you. We are going to bring up your video right now. It is approximately 2 minutes long, everyone, and of course includes music. We want to get the full effect of this, our musical guest here, so in their program. So we are going to let the music play for 2 minutes, and then Sophie, you and I will reconnect and chat after the video, okay? Sounds good, everyone. Enjoy this 2-minute video and its music. Apologies, everyone. We seem to not be able to hear the video. I apologize, everyone. I do know that music and video overlapping on Zoom can sometimes take a toll. I do not hear audio as of right now, Dan, just so you are aware. Sophie, why don't you and I jump back on the microphone at the very least, and we can discuss as it's playing. I apologize. I'm not sure why. It seems to also have trouble rendering at the moment. Dan will look into that momentarily. Can you tell me a little bit about the challenges that you faced while creating this? I mean, it seems wonderful, and I apologize we can't hear it, but I'm sure it did not come easily.
So I think it's always good to go into a project not knowing anything, because then you're not afraid of what's about to loom in front of you. So some of the challenges were actually getting the kids to film their parts. So this proved harder than we thought. We had the University of South Carolina make us a baseline recording, and we had the conductor on a green screen, and we sent that out to all the universities.
Thank you. I'm glad we were able to get a small taste of that. Sophie, I do apologize. Please continue.
So one of the challenges was actually helping all these different programs make the films with these kids. So things that we learned very quickly, headphone cords, bad idea with a bow on. Kids tangled up and stuff. Also, you know, we couldn't stipulate what devices to use. So we had to kind of boil it down to basic ingredients. You needed 2 devices, one to film from, one for the child to play and watch. What we learned at Marywood was that the music's actually quite complex. Kids find playing slowly very difficult. And it's also quite a long piece. It's like 7 minutes long. So we found that the kids needed to follow another student. So just at Marywood, that meant we had to play the piece ourselves 80 times.
Wow.
And this was going on, I felt very responsible. This was going on in all these other programs, and none of us realized it. So it became incredibly time consuming.
I apologize if you've already answered this. Can you give us a rough sense of what was the timeline of this production and process?
Yeah, I mean, total from an original idea to actually putting it out on YouTube, it took us 18 months.
Wow. So, I mean, I think it goes back to what we were talking about with Rob and Barbara, that patience is truly a virtue
Yeah.
in effect. I also think that a common theme that we're hearing, as Travis mentioned, that when he uses different platforms and different means and goes live at different times, it seems that, and I think, Travis, you also use the word flexibility, willing to adapt. I mean, those are all terms that artists have used for centuries in theory. And then you get a bunch of artists in a room, and the last thing they want to do is deviate from their vision once they're in the middle of it. So, as a not only as an educator and a leader, but you are an artist and a musician yourself in that respect. How has this process been like? Take away the education, take away the tech, take away the production. How do you feel as an artist not being in front of a live audience?
So, I mean, I think it's been amazing. I mean, we have to have new ideas. We have to create new solutions. I think the biggest thing we have to get over is our own personal reluctance to engage with what tools we actually do have, which is a computer. You know, I, for one, dislike the things intensely, but there's no choice. So first of all, we have new ideas as a result of looking at these devices and these mediums that we can access. And then in the end, I think if you just sit down and engage, it's usually pretty simple. The hurdle is the reluctance, not the actual engagement.
There seems to be another common thread that we're hearing, which is something at Fringe we've always supported, is that, you know, you do need to plan, you do need to be organized, but if you know your core values, which I think is most, be mission aside, knowing what your core values are, whether it's ethically or artistically and administratively, there comes a certain point where you just have to do it. You just have to dive in and get the work done and start and have that vision. So that's really, really interesting. I want to ask you the same question I've been asking nearly everyone, which is, if you could go back in time to 6 months ago, or if there is another musical educator who might be watching this right now, who, you know, for many people out there, it is the start of the first full school term that's probably going to be virtual at every level. What's one piece of advice you would give them, or that you wish you had been given yourself?
I think the thing I would say to somebody, you know, setting out, is just do it. Just sit down and find a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a way. There's always a solution. There's always stuff to figure out. You don't have to know the answer before you start.
Right.
You just need the idea. And maybe the idea will, like we've been saying, will evolve into something totally unexpected.
Right.
Even better, right? Like you start with one idea and you end up somewhere totally different.
I mentioned this in an interview a few weeks ago on our NPR branch here in Northeast Pennsylvania, but for Fringe Under Glass, it was a Zoom board meeting, which, by the way, on a positive note, if I never have to sit in an in-person board meeting again, I will not shed a tear.
I would agree.
And I saw a lot of people just go like, yes. I think they're more productive. We're going to talk about that in a second, group. I think they're more productive because you don't have to worry about the time getting there. There's no one at the meeting like, I got to go get my kid in a minute or two, checking the watch. But anyway, Fringe Under Glass literally started as a joke. I think someone just threw it off. Oh, well, they were referencing certain types of workers in Amsterdam behind glass windows. And it was like, and there was this moment of silence, and then it was, that could actually work. So in addition to just starting and doing something, I think a big thing is, especially now what we're seeing at every level of our society, normalcy was not necessarily good or ideal. Right. So I think the key is just any idea is worth at least hearing and listening to. Sophia, my last question for you before I'm going to bring everyone back into the conversation is, how are you personally maintaining a sense of contentment, self-care, peace of mind, however you want to say it? What's something that you found useful?
So, I think we have to acknowledge the time we're in for exactly what it is. Any time of transition, adaptation is going to be wobbly. It's full of the don't knows. And oh, look at that, and wow, I wasn't expecting that. So, I think if we just know that that's what it is, we can be comfortable being totally uncomfortable.
Very carry on. I agree. Very nice. Thank you so much, Sophia. But don't go away. So, everyone, for those of you that might be tuning in, my name is Conor Kelly O'Brien. We are chatting with some amazing panelists from Northeast Pennsylvania and beyond. Yes, anyone who is out there watching this, whether you're on Zoom or perhaps you're watching it on the Lackawanna County Arts and Culture Facebook. If you'd like to ask questions of any of our specific panelists or make comments, I wanted to do a quick check. I want to say good afternoon to Shayla, our last year speaker, who just commented, this is wonderful. Hi, Shayla. Rachel, a wonderful regional musician. We also have various greetings and well wishes from Paula, Michael Sorrentino, Brian Joseph, Paolo, Chris Calvey, our programs manager at Lackawanna County. I also wanted to point out, Travis, if you haven't noticed, I want to make sure that you see, we had a comment on the Zoom chat from an audience member, Sandy, who stated that, Travis, I love the project with Ironworks and would love to work a similar project that combines social justice, sewing, and quilting, and they provided their email address. So thank you all. I'd love to see these new partnerships and collaborations. I'm going to open this up to any panelist. This is an easy way for me to look creative and do less work. I'm curious to know, panelists, if you have a specific question for another fellow panelist as you've been hearing the conversations, or just a comment on what they've stated.
I would have to say that I have some envy for Travis in that you were able to gather on Juneteenth. We're normally part of a park and planning celebration here, but in Prince George's County, Maryland, where we exist, it was a really, it was a hot spot. It is a hot spot. And so restrictions are still really pretty heavily enforced. So hooray that you were able to do that. And I would also like to say a word about the word normal or normalcy. And I just want to say that I have no interest in going back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
That personally, it wasn't working for me in a lot of ways. And I see how for my friends, for a number of reasons, whether they are religious or racial or ethnic or, cultural, this country hasn't been working for a lot of people. This world hasn't been. Yeah. And I would urge everyone to just really imagine what the world would look like if you could really have it your way. And I want to put a plug in for Nina Simon and the Of, By, For All Change Network. And if anyone is interested, they are not paying me to say this, but if anyone is interested in doing some real deep work in how to be better and do better, we signed up to be part of the current cohort. And it is some deep, deep work with our board, with our staff, with our community about being of, by, for all of our community. And that really means all.
Yeah, I want to give a comment. I want to acknowledge that Glynis Johns, the founder and CEO of the Black Scranton Project, has just commented. She wanted to say congratulations to Travis for the Art at the State Award. You are truly the #1 artist in the state. For those that don't know, and I'm sorry if we didn't have time to get to it during Travis's presentation, Travis was acknowledged in our statewide art exhibition, Art at the State, with a beautiful, beautiful piece that you can easily find online. And it was well deserved. I also want to mention that Glynis Johns and Travis and their entire team at the Black Scranton Project are in the process of not only opening, but owning their own Black Scranton Cultural Center here in the city. And I think it speaks a lot to what Barbara was just saying about, partnerships are wonderful and we can talk about inclusivity and we should be, but ultimately, and I said this yesterday, I was actually in a meeting with Glynis, or a chat with Glynis, that, it's the old adage of there's a difference between having a seat at the table and owning your own table. And I think that that's so important, whether it's for our Black, Indigenous, people of color community, to a different, degree. I think we also, I'm a proud member of the queer community, and I think that we really need to be having these conversations. And a lot of us have touched on them, if not outright spoken to them. And I think that's so, so important that we're discussing that. With that in mind, because Black Scranton is a very dedicated creative partner of Scranton Fringe, I wanted to ask everybody, what new partnerships have you seen develop out of this process? Some of you may have touched on some, or maybe there's brand new ones. Rob talked about an entire national, set of partnerships that were created around that virtual event. Can anyone speak to a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly about forging new partnerships in our brave new world?
I would say for us, definitely creating and sharing ideas with new teachers, young teachers, and different institutions. I mean, there's a need, since we've been shut down, to really share ideas in a way that wasn't there before. I mean, I think it's much easier in our pre-pandemic world to be closed off in our little corners doing our own thing, and now there's this burning desire to communicate with each other.
Rob, I see you unmuted. Was there something you wanted to add to that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, talking about these partnerships, right? Looking at least in the case of the Japanese American community, we had the largest collaboration nationwide since the redress movement, when our communities demanded an apology from the United States government for the incarceration in World War II. And that wouldn't have happened without the pandemic. So the kinds of conversations that we're having right now, I mean, on a nearly daily basis during those 9 weeks, we were connecting with people who were constantly reaching out to us and saying things like, this is the first time I've ever been able to open up and talk about my incarceration experience. And these were like childhood incarcerees who, you know, had this kind of weight of a trauma with them their entire adult lives. And actually giving them that opportunity to unburden themselves through an arts program was so incredible. And it continues, right? Because we have these conversations, not just with the Japanese American community, but with the Japanese diaspora in South America, who also were incarcerated in similar circumstances. And it's led to some very exciting collaborations that I'm sure we'll continue to see a lot of creative works come from.
Rob, if our audience wants to learn more, not just about this particular program that you are discussing, but you know, our history of, you know, the incarceration of Asian Americans during World War II, is your website a good resource to go to, or would there be a different resource that you would recommend first?
Yeah, so the Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages website that I shared is a terrific resource. It has all kinds of educational resources. Another one is Densho, which is an online archive related specifically to the Japanese American internment camps in World War II.
Thank you
and
so
I can give a link to that as well.
Please do. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask everyone in the group, before I turn it back over to Maureen to conclude our conversation, has there been, we've talked about practical tips, we've talked about the overarching goals and thoughts on our programming, but I really would love to know from a personal level, has there been a particular moment, an event that you can touch on that has happened over the course of this that just really, that reaffirmed that you were doing the right thing for your organization or project, that there was a, you know, I don't want to say an aha moment as if you didn't know, but you know, something that really touched my heart is cold as a rock, but I've had a few moments that have actually touched me in this process. I will give you one example. We partnered with a few local nonprofits and a youth shelter to give tickets to Fringe Under Glass, which was all outdoors and masked and distanced, of course, and sanitized, for regional youth, which was predominantly regional youth of color and also intersected with LGBTQ youth who normally don't attend, whether for financial or just they don't feel welcomed or know about the programming. And when one of them was watching the multimedia presentation by the Black Scranton Project, I was chatting with them afterward. They had just seen all the shows and done their route. And they said that, you know, I love art so much. I want to be an artist. And I just never really knew that I could be here. And they, I mean, literally meant the street that they probably live 10 blocks away from. And for me personally, that was so a beautiful moment. Did anyone else, we have a question from someone, but we'll get to that in a second. But first, does anyone else have that kind of impactful moment experience during COVID-19 in your work?
I could give an example.
Please.
So actually this happened last night. So the Everhart just, as I mentioned before, put up our new exhibition, Eyes on America, at the beginning of September. And typically with new exhibitions, we have a physical in-person opening that's ticketed. But obviously in a COVID world, we had to really reimagine what that looked like. So after a couple of different ideas, we ended up settling on doing something virtual that would be pay as you wish, to kind of open the door to make it more equitable for people that could join us, especially since we know a lot of people are having financial implications, but also be able to explore the exhibit. So the exhibit explores American history through a couple of different lenses. And it was hosted on YouTube, which I think is a pretty accessible platform for most people. And at the end, we had a lot of people commenting, saying that they were really thankful for the event. They thought it was great. And there was one mom that actually commented and said, me and my son watched this. He's actually learning about American history in cyber school. And this was really a great experience for us to be able to watch this together about content that is really relevant to him. So that was really a moment that myself and other staff that were involved felt, I think, pretty validated in being able to share that kind of content and make it accessible to our community.
Fantastic, thank you.
I would say for us, it was partnering with our neighbor Pizzeria Paradiso, and one of the things that was really important to us was realizing that in the pre-COVID world, the arts really have been seen often as a luxury, and it sort of like got more intense for a minute of like, all of the funding was going to feeding people and supporting people economically, of course, and rightly so. But we also had, I think, a cultural awareness explosion when we all recognized how we were now going in our homes online to watch the Metropolitan Opera, to listen to musicians playing on Facebook Live. And so I think there was a recognition of the importance of the arts. And so when we were able to make this partnership where we gave out art activities and food, it was really well respected by our community leaders and people. The letters, the personal thank yous, in person. It was an extraordinary experience to be able to feed people's bodies and their spirits with food and art.
Thank you so much. We did have a comment from Jess Mione, a regional event organizer and community leader herself. She stated, "I'd love to see this kind of roundtable discussion with all different arts organizations around the nation monthly. This gave me such inspiration on how folks are handling this and even improving their logistics. Bravo." Thank you, Jess, for tuning in, and thank you for that. I want to personally thank each and every single one of our panelists. This could go on for another hour or two, but we are winding down to our last few minutes. I want to thank everyone again. I wanted to do a quick plug for myself. I am going to be on WVIA, our regional PBS station, next Thursday at 8 o'clock on Keystone Edition to discuss Fringe Under Glass, so I can go into more detail then. I am also hosting another panel on behalf of various community groups, Hold Your Neighbor, being LGBTQ in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, and that'll be online Thursday, October 22nd at 7 p.m., and that is being sponsored by Geisinger as well as various organizations. So I did my plug. I want to thank all of my panelists. I wanted to give all our panelists one last opportunity, particularly those that hadn't just recently spoke. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, clarify, or answer to that we may not have had time so far?
Okay. For those of you who aren't, just follow the Black Scranton Project on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's all the same handle. And my plug as well is Paintings by the Prince. If you want to check out more of my art and anything that I'm doing on all social media platforms.
Thank you, Travis. Is there anyone else that wanted to plug their websites one more time, or social media or upcoming programming very quickly?
I'll just plug, I already shared a link to the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival ticketing website. I'm going to share a link now to the virtual program guide. Even though we're not printing a physical program for the diehard attendees, we still have an online program. So feel free to peruse the pages and then go over to that website if you'd like to participate.
Fantastic. Everyone, again, I want to thank you all so much. My name is Conor Kelly O'Brien. You can find me on all social media. Please follow at Scranton Fringe. Yes, artworksnow.org from Barbara. Thank you so much. Go support all these organizations wherever you live, because they're all doing virtual programming now, so you can enjoy it wherever you are. Thank you again so much. I'm going to pass it back over to Deputy Director of Arts and Culture of Lackawanna County, Maureen Mcguigan.
Well, that was great. What an uplifting morning. I come back to that idea of community, and that, of course, was a major theme, and building community in this new world. Won't keep you much longer, but I also did want to say collaborations. In our real world breakfast, it was amazing to see the connections that were made. One year it was Noah Scalin, who's an artist, and he did a Skull a Day project, and some of our local artists took that and created the pop-up studio was born out of that, and we've had others. So I think already to the comment we had about working with Travis, we hope that maybe we all keep in touch, and then, you know, if new people have ideas for our department or were inspired by this panel, please get in touch with me. This will be recorded too, so we encourage you to share it. And again, Jess Mione, thank you for your nice comment. She is also one of our great volunteers at the Arts Council and does all our marketing for us, all those nice social media shares listing our panelists. Well, again, it's been a great morning, but I know the human brain doesn't usually last more than 90 minutes. So we want to give you, but I think Conor's right. This was so engaging. It just went by so fast. It doesn't even feel like an hour and a half. So thank you to Rob, Barbara, Travis, Francesca, Sophie, and Conor as our moderated. Thank you for all of you responding. And if you have questions you thought about later, email me and I can get them to the panelists. And again, thank you for supporting the arts and for all that you do. And we want to wish all of our panelists good luck. And that's, again, the great thing. We can follow what each other is doing. And, you know, if you want to participate in our programs online, if you don't live in the area, you can now. And equally, you can go out and check out Barbara and Rob's programs. So thank you again. We wish you a happy, safe, healthy, and creative day. And hopefully we'll see everybody in the real world, or at least on the online world.